So, we're only a few weeks away from Brand New Day coming out, and the first trailer for Avengers Doomsday dropped recently. And I thought it was really interesting that this is the third time we've had in the same year an Avengers movie and a Spider-Man movie, the first time being in 2012 with the first Avengers and TASM, and the second time being Avengers Endgame and Far From Home. Although I'm kind of not really going to talk too much about the second time because there are a lot of similarities in the 2012 films to what we're seeing now, where the first Avengers, right, was the introduction of the Avengers as a group, and Doomsday is kind of attempting to be that as well, right, where you've got this mostly new lineup that have never interacted before. And just like how TASM, right, was a new version of Spider-Man, Brand New Day is attempting to kind of be like a new chapter or something of a relaunch, right? The start of a supposed second trilogy for Holland's version of the character. And I thought it was so interesting how, when those came out, I was 14, and just thinking about how excited I was back then compared to my sort of apathy of the current day. And it's like, I remember with TASM being excited because we hadn't had a Spider-Man movie in 5 years, which has happened now with No Way Home and Brand New Day, and I still can't believe it's actually been that long since No Way Home came out. But it had been, half a decade. I walked out of it, mostly satisfied. I still maintain that the biggest issues for me with that movie were Spider-Man's costume looking like a basketball, and I just really do not care for Lizard's design. But it was still a film that to this day I can say I mostly enjoy, regardless of whether or not TASM 2 later came around and took stuff in directions that I didn't support or care for. And man, I remember the hype for Avengers, right? The 4 year build up to a superhero film where all these pre-existing superheroes who had had their own movies all came together to interact for the first time. And that how novel that was, right? To make an actual shared universe, like to have each character go into this movie as someone the audience was already familiar with to some degree, and have them all interact and clash in this big crossover event. But again, whereas Avengers 2012 was a culmination, a lot of people feel like Doomsday is a last-ditch effort to revive interest in a tarnished brand, with little to no build-up, right? A villain that we've never seen before going up against heroes who've had little to no interactions with each other. And a lot of people feel like it's banking on nostalgia by bringing back the Fox X-Men and Robert Downey Jr. in a different role, but still, and then Chris Evans and whatnot. But it's just so interesting to think about how, the first Avengers had this like really, right, the hype for it, the positive reception, and it did launch Marvel into this solid 7 year period where they could expect billion-dollar movies, back to back, right? So whether you're talking about Iron Man 3 or Thor Ragnarok or Civil War or Infinity War, Endgame, Far From Home. If you would have told me that in less than 5 years, Marvel would start seeing its momentum die down to the point where they could put out flops and, movies that only broke even because of digital sales or some other form that wasn't just being released, I would have told you were crazy, because just back then there was so much excitement and support for what was being produced. And I do see a lot of things in Brand New Day that worry me. I think it might have too many characters or be bloated, like how I felt No Way Home was. When you're talking about a movie that has Spider-Man, Hulk, Punisher, whoever the hell Sadie Sink is playing, Tarantula, MJ, Ned, MJ's new boyfriend, apparently Shocker, Yelena's apparently going to be in this as well. It's just when I start hearing that, I do get kind of worried. And again, what I appreciate so much about the first TASM, even today, is that it's such a smaller scale story, right? You have one superhero, one supervillain, a small set of supporting characters, whereas with every Holland film, it's always him being babysat by some other bigger veteran superhero or actor. And then when you add in, right, like the multiple villains and other heroes, and then of course the subplots with the regular cast members, I'm kind of not too enthused. But again, even in just kind of being neutral to it, I do think it'll make money. I think it'll be a billion-dollar film easily. Not gonna say that for Doomsday, because they're blowing through hundreds of millions of dollars on this thing. So I'm not really as optimistic about their returns, or that that film will be of any quality. But isn't that interesting, right? That 14 years removed from each other, we have a Spider-Man film and an Avengers film that are trying to launch or kind of be the start of some new era or phase for the respective franchises that they're in. And another thing that makes 2026 the new 2012 is that next year we're getting Man of Tomorrow, right? So Superman 2. Uh, and Man of Steel came out in 2013. So this year, just like 2012 had a Superman movie come out the following year. And what's even crazier is that when the Batman Part 2 was first delayed, it was supposed to come out this year, which would have made this year similar to 2012 and having a Spider-Man, Avengers, and Batman movie all come out in the same year until they kept postponing the Batman. That movie's probably not going to come out until 2050 at this rate. But yeah, it's just interesting to think about how the more things change, the more they stay the same. And also, someone could say, me not being excited probably has to do with, when I was a kid, I guess it was easier to impress me. But I don't dislike Marvel, right? Like, in terms of its characters, in terms of just, like, as a concept. I've never been a fan of this particular version of Spider-Man. And I do think the Avengers film is kind of like them taking a bunch of stuff that has nothing to do with each other and trying to see if it sticks. And I do think they would have been better off just making a smaller scale movie with like maybe 8 or 9 superheroes and a villain, and then mostly having it be about this new lineup getting to know each other and then saving a bigger crossover for a future film. But again, I don't dislike either of these IPs simply for being what they are. It's more that I just don't agree with the direction that they've gone in. But I do hope that they're both good. It was just interesting to think about how those same couple of IPs were all being released around the same time, as they were back then, because we didn't get a Superman solo movie for 12 years, right? So it's really interesting that the sequel to that is coming out so quickly to where, it's only 2 years removed from the first film, and also, coming out right around the time that we got a Spider-Man and Avengers movie, just like it did over 10 years ago with Man of Steel and Avengers and TASM.